I watched the Uber pull away from our driveway through a crack in the blinds. She didn't even glance back at the house. Maybe she knew I was watching. Maybe she didn't care. She was wearing a dress I hadn't seen before. Lipstick too bold for an office dinner. Heels too high for the woman who claimed she hated fussy shoes. And perfume new, floral, expensive. Not the kind you wear for a coworker unless your definition of coworker involves dim lighting and shared hotel receipts. I didn't text her. Didn't call. Didn't ask who Trevor really was. Because earlier that day, I stood in the kitchen holding a small chocolate cake. One candle stuck awkwardly in the center, waiting for her to come downstairs. I practiced singing Happy Birthday alone like an idiot twice, just to get the pitch right, just to make her smile. She walked in, saw the cake, and wrinkled her nose like it was spoiled milk. I told you not to make a fuss this year. She didn't even sit down. And before I could say anything, she said the words that made my stomach drop. I already made dinner plans with Trevor. I told you this. She hadn't. But maybe she did, in a way I didn't want to hear. I stood there, candle still unlit, watching her grab her purse and walk out like I was an old roommate who overstayed my welcome. That was 3 hours ago. The candle melted sideways while I stared at my phone screen. Her location was off. Her birthday status updates were public. Her smile in that tagged restaurant photo wasn't for me. The caption? Work fam birthday vibes. Work fam. That's what we were now. I walked to the kitchen, picked up the soggy cake, and tossed it in the trash. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even sigh. I just started packing. Not a bag. Not a suitcase. Something different. Because she thought I'd sulk. Thought I'd sit and wait and scroll through old photos like a wounded puppy. She thought I was bluffing when I said, "One day, you'll push too far." She was wrong. And tonight, I'm done waiting for her to remember who bought her that house, who paid off her student loans, who held her hand through every broken thing, until I became the broken thing. She blew out the candle before I could light it. But I've got my own match now. I didn't leave right away. I sat on the edge of the bed for over an hour, listening to the faint tick of the wall clock and the distant sounds of traffic outside our window. It was her birthday, but the silence in our home was deafening. I looked around the room, at the untouched gift I wrapped days ago, a leather-bound journal with her initials pressed in gold, and felt like a stranger in my own life. Everything I had built to make her happy now just mocked me. The candle I lit earlier had collapsed into a puddle of wax on the kitchen counter, like it gave up waiting for her just like I had. I finally got up and walked to the closet, not to pack my bags, but to pull out the small fireproof box I kept behind the winter coats. It held copies of documents, bank statements, credit card charges, receipts. I hadn't planned to use them, but something in me shifted when I saw that restaurant photo again, this time with Trevor's hand on the small of her back. He was grinning like he'd won, and maybe he had. I didn't rage. I didn't break anything. I just opened my laptop. I logged into our joint accounts, the ones I'd set up years ago when she still said things like, "Forever." I wasn't going to drain them or do anything illegal, but I moved enough into a private account to take care of myself if things went where I thought they were going. I felt guilty for 5 minutes. Then I remembered the hotel receipt I found last month. The one she claimed was from a conference. A single king bed, 2 guests, and room service for 3 nights. I had copied it. I had printed it. I had kept it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because something in me knew this day would come. I didn't plan to confront her tonight. That would be expected. And people like her, people who are always 5 steps ahead in emotional warfare, expect the big dramatic showdown. That's where they shine. That's where they twist the script until you're apologizing for their betrayal. No, I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I opened a note on my phone and began writing something short, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Not angry, not accusatory, just undeniable. Then I printed a photo, not of us, of her and Trevor, the one someone else had posted and tagged her in just 30 minutes ago. I pinned the photo and the note to the fridge with the magnet we got on our honeymoon. The irony made me feel sick. She'd see it the second she came home. Then I grabbed my jacket, wallet, and the small set of keys I hadn't touched in years. Keys to a storage unit I used when we moved into this house. Before I left, I took one last look around. Not to say goodbye. To remember how it felt to be invisible in the place I once called home. She thought I was bluffing when I said I was done being second. She has no idea what I'm capable of when I finally believe myself. The air inside the storage unit was musty and cold, but familiar. It hadn't changed much since I last stepped inside. Dust still clung to the corners, and the faint smell of cardboard and old wood filled my lungs. I flipped on the single yellow bulb that buzzed overhead. Boxes stacked neatly along the wall contained fragments of my old life. Not ours, mine. College notes. Letters from my dad. The laptop I used before we moved in together and I upgraded to match her minimalist aesthetic. Funny how I used to think becoming one meant erasing parts of myself. I dug into one of the boxes and found what I came for. A small black notebook. I started journaling when I realized I no longer had anyone to talk to. At least not without being corrected, judged, or ignored. I hadn't written in months, but every page up until that point was a record of little betrayals. Not affairs, no, those came later. I'm talking about the silent kind. The ones no one sees but you. Like the time she rolled her eyes when I shared a promotion I was proud of. Or how she'd laugh louder at texts than at anything I said. How she started locking her phone the moment I walked into the room. The first time she told me, "I don't need you to fix everything." When I offered to help her through a work problem, I started writing all of it down because I needed proof for myself that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't paranoid, that I wasn't weak. Turns out, I was just awake. That notebook would be useful now. Not for revenge, but to remember who I used to be before she shrank me. Before I became a shadow pacing around a house filled with fake plants and cold stares. I threw it in my bag, then reached for an old photo. Me and my brother on a camping trip when I still smiled like I meant it. I had no idea I'd need that photo again. Not yet. I left the storage unit just before midnight and drove to the only place I knew she wouldn't think to look. The guest house my late uncle left me. We never used it. She said it was too far from everything important. But tonight, its creaky floors and outdated wallpaper felt more like home than anywhere else. I set my bag down, unlocked my phone, and saw the notification pop up. "Kendall, hey, are you still awake?" I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, "Can we talk?" Then another, "What is this note? What is this picture? Why would you do this on my birthday?" The phrasing alone told me everything I needed. Why would you do this on my birthday? Not a word about Trevor. Not a question about the account withdrawals or the empty closet. Just indignation, as if I had ruined her night by acknowledging her truth. She called. I let it ring. She called again. And again. I sat on the edge of the guest house bed, staring at her name lighting up the screen, and I swear I heard her voice through the silence, already rehearsing a speech about how I misunderstood, how she just needed a break, how she felt unseen. But tonight wasn't about her feelings anymore. It was about mine. So I finally picked up the call. I didn't say hello. I just whispered, "Check the envelope taped to the back of the fridge magnet." And then I hung up. I sat in the dark, waiting for the sound of a shattering world. Not mine. Hers. The guest house was dead quiet after I hung up. Not peaceful quiet, just empty. The kind of silence that makes you question every decision you've ever made, until the stillness itself starts whispering doubts. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, holding the phone like it still weighed something, like her voice might suddenly leak out of the speaker and offer something real for once. An apology. An answer. But nothing came. And I knew she was reading it by now. Inside that envelope taped behind the magnet was a single sheet of paper. One page. No anger, no name-calling. Just facts. Dates. Screenshots. Printouts. And a short message handwritten in the center. "This is what you chose when you stopped choosing me." That was it. No threats. No promises. No begging her to stay or making her feel guilty. I didn't need her to feel anything anymore. I just needed her to see it. I wanted her to face what I had lived with for months. The growing shadow behind every casual smile. The way she'd look through me like I was furniture with feelings. The nights I lay awake while she laughed into her phone in the bathroom with the door locked. She had already replaced me emotionally. The dinner with Trevor just made it official. It was past 1 a.m. when she called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then the texts started coming. First angry, then confused, then suddenly sentimental. This isn't what you think it is. Why are you doing this to us? We can fix this. I want to talk. Curtis, please. I'm scared. And that last one, it got to me. Not because I believed it, but because that used to be my role. I used to be the one she called when she was scared, when her car wouldn't start, when she got sick, when she lost her job for 3 months and I covered every bill without blinking. I was her safety net, her constant, her calm. But now my distance was a threat. The unknown was something she couldn't control. And for someone like Kendall, that was worse than guilt, worse than shame. It was fear. I let the messages sit. I opened my laptop, connected to the weak guesthouse Wi-Fi, and started drafting an email. Not to her, to my lawyer. We had one on retainer for a property issue years ago. I still had his number saved under L.D. She never bothered to ask what it stood for. Just another thing about my life that didn't interest her anymore. I started typing, "Hi Leonard. I believe I'm ready to file. There's no confrontation at this time, but I have documentation ready. I'd like to discuss protecting my assets and next steps." My fingers hesitated over the last line. I reread it, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Wondering if I was throwing away a decade of marriage over a few dinners, a few lies, a few broken expectations. But that's the trap, isn't it? When someone chips away at you slowly, you don't notice the collapse until there's nothing left to stand on. This wasn't about a birthday, or even Trevor. It was about the moment I realized I didn't matter anymore. I hit send, closed the laptop. Another message buzzed on my phone. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." I stared at it for a long time. Then I locked the screen, turned off the lamp, and laid back on the lumpy guesthouse mattress, letting the silence finally wash over me. Not empty this time, but earned. Solid. Like the first brick of something new. She thought I wouldn't do it. She thought I'd stay. But the candle melted. The dinner ended. And the envelope was open. The next morning, the sunlight pushed through the dusty blinds of the guesthouse like it had something urgent to say. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I looked around. Wood-paneled walls, creaky floor under my feet, the faint smell of mildew, and I remembered. I remembered everything. The cake she never touched, the Uber she smiled into, the texts that shifted from irritation to desperation. And the envelope. God, the envelope. I checked my phone. 11 missed calls. For voicemails. A dozen texts. All from her. All unread. I didn't open a single one. My chest tightened just reading the previews. Those little half-sentences that reveal so much more than she probably realized. "We need to talk. You're overreacting. I didn't mean for it to look like that. Don't ruin everything because of one bad choice. You're scaring me, Curtis." She always played the fear card when control started slipping. But this time it wasn't working. Not because I wanted to punish her. I didn't. I just couldn't play the same role anymore. The quiet man in the background who smiles politely while his wife slowly erases him with every calculated, "Oops." And you're imagining things. I made coffee, cheap, instant stuff I found in the cabinet. Tasted like ash. But it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't adjusting to someone else's preferences. I didn't have to ask which mug was okay to use or if the creamer was dairy-free. I sat in silence and sipped, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue like a reminder that some things aren't supposed to go down easy. Around 9 a.m., my phone rang again. I turned the volume all the way down and watched it vibrate across the counter. It was her again. But this time, something was different. She left a voicemail. I listened. "Curtis, I came home last night and everything felt wrong. The note, the photos. I don't even know where to start. Please don't do anything you'll regret. I made a mistake. Okay? Just one. It didn't mean what you think it meant. I needed to feel wanted. Trevor it wasn't supposed to be like that. I'm not even sure it was anything real. I miss you. Please come home. Please. It was a decent performance. Almost convincing, even. But what stood out wasn't the apology. It was the language. Don't do anything you'll regret. Not I'm sorry I hurt you. Not I broke your trust and I want to fix it. She was worried about fallout. About what I might say. What I might do. And the irony? I hadn't told a soul. Not yet. I hadn't posted online. Hadn't called friends. Hadn't confided in anyone except the lawyer whose email reply was already sitting in my inbox with a subject line that read, "Let's talk next steps." The only thing she feared was losing control of the narrative. And that was already happening. I didn't respond. Instead, I grabbed my keys and drove. Somewhere familiar, but not too obvious. A diner off the highway where I used to go when we first moved in together. I hadn't been there in years. She thought it was too greasy. But I remembered the waitress with the bee tattoo who always gave me extra fries, the radio that only played old country, the cracked red booths that always squeaked when you slid in. I ordered the same thing I used to, grilled cheese and black coffee. While I waited, I took out my phone, scrolled to our shared photo album, and started deleting. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I didn't need reminders of our curated smiles, the filtered sunsets, the fake joy we both pretended to feel. I kept a few, the real ones, the ones before things shifted, before I became a burden and she became someone I didn't recognize. When I got back to the guest house, there was a car parked in the driveway. Her car. She was here. And from the way she sat on the front step, arms wrapped around herself, face red and damp, I could tell. She wasn't just waiting. She was unraveling. I opened the door before she could knock again. Up close, she looked smaller. More raw than the staged sadness from her voicemails. Her mascara had run in thin rivers down her cheeks, and her hair had fallen out of that careful twist she wore to look effortless. She was clutching her purse like it was a life raft. "Please," she said the second our eyes met. "Just let me explain. I didn't mean." She didn't finish. She never did. That used to be my job, to let her finish the sentence she couldn't in public. To supply the apology she'd rehearse in the mirror. Tonight, I listened the way I hadn't been allowed to listen for a long time, without interrupting, without pleading. She talked like someone reading from a script she'd written in a panic. The lonely months at work, the late-night messages that meant nothing, the way Trevor made her feel desired. She used words like mistake and blur and confused. She said she was scared I'd make a scene. She said she wanted to fix it. She said a lot of things I once would have believed. When she paused, I reached into my jacket pocket and set a small stack of papers on the porch step like a judge delivering a sentence. Bank transfer receipts. A printout of the hotel reservation she'd claimed was a conference. A screenshot of the message from Trevor, his smug little emoji and the line about the dress. And at the top, the line I'd written in block letters the night before, "You chose this." She stared at the papers as if they were foreign currency. "Where did you get those?" she whispered. "Where you left them," I said. "You were sloppy. You uploaded a draft to our shared cloud and left it unsent. You used your work laptop and never cleared the history. You thought a few clicks in the dark would be invisible." Her breath hitched. For the first time in months, she looked like she'd been caught out of costume. "You can't," she started, then stopped. She reached for the papers like a drowning person reaching for air, but her hands trembled too much to pick them up. Instead, she sank onto the top step and pressed her forehead to her knees. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked, voice small. "If this gets out. If this gets out?" I repeated, calm as a man reading aloud in a library. "Kendall, it already is out. I didn't post anything. I didn't call your friends. I didn't tell my parents. I did something else. I moved money into an account you don't know about. I called Leonard. I printed everything and I put it in the envelope on the fridge, because I wanted you to look at it. I wanted you to see what you'd become when you decided someone else's touch was worth more than the life we built." She made a sound that wasn't a sob so much as a breakdown of the defenses she'd relied on for years. "Please," she said again. "I'll fix it. I'll talk to Trevor. You'll do what people like you always do." I cut her off, but there was no venom in my words, only a tired clarity. "You'll manage who knows what. You'll spin and gaslight and maybe beg my forgiveness when you're scared of being caught. But I don't want your apology on a stage. I don't want your theatrics. I want a future where I know I can sleep without being awake to someone else's laughter in the bathroom." She looked up then, and for a fraction of a second I saw the girl I'd fallen for. Confused, frightened, not yet hardened into that strategic cruelty. "Don't go," she whispered. I let the silence between us do the work she'd refused to let me do for years. Out of the house, beyond the porch light, the morning felt like a clean sheet. "I'm not staying," I said finally. "Not like this, but I'm not leaving to hurt you. I'm leaving to remember how to be myself." She reached out as if to stop me, but her hand hovered useless in the air. Then, softer than anything else, she said, "What will you do with the papers?" I folded them back into my pocket. "I'll do what I have to do," I said, "and I'll give you one last chance to decide who you want to be when this is over." She let out a sound that could have been a laugh or a sob. Behind us, a car door slammed on the street, a noise so ordinary it felt obscene. I closed the door gently, not shutting her out so much as closing the chapter. She stayed on the porch long after I closed the door. I could see her shadow through the curtain, small, still, like she was waiting for a line that would save the scene. But there was no performance left. No cue. I sat on the edge of the guesthouse bed, staring at the blank wall across from me, feeling like I just survived an earthquake no one else felt. Every part of me ached, but not from anger. From release. I had been holding this marriage up alone for so long, I forgot how heavy it was. And now that I'd let go, I was finally feeling what it meant to be free and broken. Eventually, I heard the car door open and close. She left. Not a single word through the door. Not a note. Nothing. And it was strange how that didn't hurt the way I expected. It just confirmed things. Confirmed that she never truly came to stay. She came to salvage what was convenient. I opened my email again. Leonard had already responded. "Curtis, I've reviewed your documentation. It's thorough. We can proceed without confrontation. Based on what you've shown me, you're in a strong position to retain both the property and your retirement accounts." That last part hit me harder than it should have. I'd spent years imagining our retirement. Beach towns, used bookstores, her sipping tea while I got sunburned trying to grill fish. I used to picture that life like it was inevitable. Now, it felt like something that belonged to a different man. A man who trusted words like forever. I sent Leonard a short reply. "Move forward. I'll sign whatever's needed. No delays." Then I closed the laptop, grabbed the notebook I'd pulled from storage, and did something I hadn't done in months. I wrote. I wrote about the first time I caught her lying. About the time she said she was working late and I brought her dinner, only to find her car gone and her phone off. I wrote about the way she used to kiss me without hesitation, and how that kiss turned into a courtesy. I wrote about the shame I felt when I started monitoring her location. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't trust myself to see the truth anymore. And then I wrote the words that finally made me cry. She didn't destroy us. She just stopped showing up. And I stayed. I stayed until I became a ghost. I don't know how long I sat there. The room was quiet, the pages blurred. But for the first time, the tears weren't about her. They were about the version of me that never asked for more. The man who folded himself into smaller and smaller pieces just to keep the shape of the marriage intact. That night I didn't eat. I didn't scroll. I didn't check to see if she texted again. I slept with the window cracked open, letting the cold air numb my skin and the sound of distant traffic replace the chaos in my head. The pain didn't go away, but it stopped screaming. In the morning, I woke up before the sun, packed a small duffel, and left the guest house. I didn't go back to our house. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I just drove. Past the neighborhood with the overpriced coffee shop. Past the park where we once carved our initials into a tree. Past the life we pretended was still working. She would wake up eventually and realize I was gone. Not just physically, but emotionally. There would be no final fight, no dramatic exit, just absence. And in that absence, I hoped she would finally see what it cost to treat love like a convenience. A week passed, then another. The text stopped. The calls faded into silence. There was no grand apology, no airport chase scene, no tearful realization under the rain. Just quiet. And for once, that silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like breathing room, like clarity. I stayed at the guest house a little longer, fixed up a few things, let my mind slow down. I read. I wrote. I started running again. Nothing major. Just a mile at first. Then 2. Each step felt like I was shaking off pieces of a life I no longer owed anyone. Kendall emailed me 3 days after I officially filed. It wasn't long. Just a line and a PDF with her signature. I understand now. I'm letting go. I hope someday we both find what we were missing. No blame. No begging. Just acceptance. It wasn't the closure she wanted, but it was the peace I needed. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because some goodbyes are better left clean. I moved into a small apartment near the lake. Nothing fancy. 2nd floor walk-up. The kitchen's too small and the water pressure's annoying, but the view in the morning? Golden. I bought a used bookshelf, filled it with the stories I'd forgotten to finish. I even bought a plant, and it's still alive. That's saying something. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about her. Not with bitterness, but with a strange kind of nostalgia. Like remembering a song you used to love that doesn't hit the same anymore. You still know the lyrics, you just don't sing along. And me? I'm learning how to take up space again. How to enjoy a quiet dinner alone without feeling empty. How to laugh at bad movies without needing someone else in the room. How to be Curtis, not the husband, not the placeholder, just me. She thought I was bluffing. She thought I wouldn't leave. But sometimes the softest men walk away the hardest. And when they do, they don't return with revenge. They return with peace. With purpose. With pages unwritten. So yeah, I didn't burn our life down. I just chose to stop setting myself on fire to keep it warm. Thanks for being here, friends. You've been watching Reddit Confessions. Was there a moment in this story that hit you hardest? Maybe something you've been through yourself? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story too. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful confessions every week.